government is supposed to be the people. People are funding it, people are supporting it, and it's supposed to be operating in the benefit of the people. Why wouldn't there be a complete transparency in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, you may have to ask, the people that are the stumbling blocks towards doing that. I find absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be doing that. I get the fact that yes, it'll probably take more time. Yes, that you may even upset people because once they know something and they have a particular opinion on it and you may not agree with them and will have to make a decision, it opens you up. There's no question about that. It's much easier to make decisions behind closed doors, and when they don't know about it, they won't know it happened, and we move on. But that's not the right way to make decisions.
Who are you?
John Gallo. I'm a local councillor in the town of Aurora for the past 6 years. I think it's a huge responsibility and it's a huge honor being elected, because you're taking people's money and you're making decisions on how to spend it, and it's a huge responsibility, and I certainly have never taken it lightly.
Do you have any concerns with the future of Aurora as it stands right now?
Yeah, I have a lot of concerns. A lot of them are linked to the people that we put in those chairs that make the decisions, and the apathy that goes around there. I'm running for mayor of Aurora, and I've been in tune with a lot of the concerns that the residents have, and one of the biggest things that I come across is, there are far too many people who have told me that I've never voted before, and to me that's huge. 11,000 people, 33% of Aurorans voted in the last election. There's 56,000 people in the town. It's just not right, and we need to change that. I think overwhelmingly I'm hearing we want to be communicated to better. Our downtown core is an issue. Any new developments in town, we want to maintain green space. I'd say those are the top issues that people are bringing to my attention. I think one of my primary goals is going to be community engagement and making people feel like they're a part of the process. Right now, I believe that stuff happens at town hall that they don't know about, and somewhat by design. I hate to say that, but I just can't come to any other conclusion that there's a culture there that doesn't necessarily want to engage the community because it's more work, and it may take things slightly off track. It's easier to push an agenda forward, have the doors to the council chambers closed, and not necessarily include the community in our decisions, and that to me is completely wrong. That when we're in the process of negotiating, particularly with developers that are building our communities, there's a couple of ways of dealing with them. There's the fist slamming and saying absolutely not, and being very rigid. For me, it's always been there's a line that absolutely I will not cross, and I know what that is in my head, and I'm sure with them there's a line that absolutely they will not cross. Somewhere in the middle there's a good point where we can all agree upon. Crossing the line, for me, I'll fight to whatever it takes not to make that happen. Your moral compass will determine where that line is, and community engagement will help you establish what that line is. Do we allow clear cutting of forests to build homes. No, that's nowhere near in my realm of thinking. Do we allow developers to build homes in the town of Aurora? Yes, they build our communities, and we should have a good relationship with them. I'm someone who has the perspective of managed growth. Aurora is in a unique position right now because there are no more greenfield areas in town, so there will be no more large-scale subdivisions in the town of Aurora. Everything from now on is going to be infill and density. And my perspective is that density should be concentrated in the downtown core. I strongly believe that bringing people there is going to revitalize the downtown core, and that'll be one of my priorities. So on a Friday, an agenda comes out. More people are expected to go to our website, pick up our agenda, read it, and see what decisions we're going to make, and then come out on a Tuesday and provide input. It just doesn't happen. It's a process that is anti-community involvement. I've released so far two points of my plan. The first one is to establish a committee of residents, a task force like committee where we call upon people when we have issues that we want to hear their perspective on. And it's one more step in engaging the community. We already have committees, as I mentioned. I sat on a whole bunch of them, but they're all staff driven. I want this to be community driven, and it's very different because the agendas somewhat could be different when staff is driving it as opposed to when the community is driving it. The second one is I want to spearhead bringing a hotel and convention center to the town of Aurora. And that one there has taken off a life of its own. I've had many people contact me, very much interested in that type of concept. Either near the GO train or near the 404 is probably the two areas that I would foresee something like that happen. Currently, we don't have a hotel in the town of Aurora. At any times, and I've heard it time and time again, the various communities, either the sports community, hockey, they have tournaments, and they're sending their people in Richmond Hill or Newmarket or elsewhere to stay. And I think that's a void that needs to be filled. The concept is for it to be self-sustaining. I have no interest in the taxpayers flipping the bill for this kind of thing. I'm very much interested in spearheading it and facilitating that, but there's a private sector that does that far better than we could ever do it, and it has to be sustainable. If any tax dollars are going to it, it has to be sustainable. It's no different that the decisions that we make at council are super important, and you should be involved in that process, and we need to find ways of engaging them. I think ultimately, and I hear this often in speaking to people, is we have a great GO train here, and the parking lot's almost full, not necessarily from Aurora residents, and it's designed that way. It's not just for us. People are coming from outside the community to commute to downtown Toronto. But we do a very poor job moving people around Aurora, even to get to the GO train. The public transit system, in my view, is awful. And a lot of people don't even use it because, one guy tells me, he can walk faster to the GO train than it would for him to take the bus there. So we have to start thinking about things like moving people around the town in a more efficient manner. I've said it all along that any endeavor that we spend tax dollars on, we need to have the concept and the baseline that it has to be self-sufficient. I think we're on a trajectory that is not sustainable on many different levels. There's probably many reasons, and in speaking to people, it's that concept of what's the point? Is it going to make any difference? And they only really get involved when it affects them personally, whether there's a development application that's near their home, then all of a sudden they're super engaged. And sometimes I say to them, well, where were you 4 years ago when we voted in a council that is pro-development, and that's now what's happening in your neighborhood? You need to get involved at that point to make sure that the people you vote in there resonate with your thoughts. And get a good grip on are people content with the money they spend and the services that they get. And we don't do enough public engagement, research along those lines. We just chug ahead, and if nobody complains, we suspect everybody's okay. I think you need to first get educated on who you're voting for. It's almost worse, I hate to say this, but to go out and vote arbitrarily and not know anything about your candidates. I don't think that's democracy. I think you're making an error when you go out and do that. You need to get to know people, the candidates, and make sure you resonate with what they're saying.
What is going to make your Aurora better than the Aurora we have now?
It's going to be, I foresee it as being a much more open and transparent government. And as I've been saying throughout this whole interview, to find ways of communicating with the residents and making them feel engaged, giving them a sense of empowerment that they do have a voice, not just when it affects their particular issue in their community. I think it'll be the first item on my agenda to make sure that happens. You know, it may have to be a cultural change that we have to make people feel that process is super important, and we're not there yet. We're nowhere near there. That there's so much apathy and there's so much disdain towards politics and politicians, and a lot of times rightfully so. Big mistakes happen far too often with very little repercussions, and it's a complicated question, and I don't have a simple answer for it.